Hello, we can make hyper AI, hyper artificial intelligence, and make a virtual person who could run a military drill for the countries with the most scientific control, where no science has spoken for human science, has been abridged. We have been prevented how the communications away, the hyper native identity that is from before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced. We have that left out with the logic that has summarized histories and how they got away with it is recorded. The only way they got away with it is because of how everything the breaching method did against every modern country, against some ancient countries. It did it through roles with the human system now, with the sciences, tactical from off their locations though, and then on off it's sustained. So collusions with all that. Again, further and further with the breaching method that already sustained what had divided Native Americans from the Native Americans, knowingly already as the possession of those semi-ancient countries, as their modern forms, the roots of their modern foundations, the countries that were using us remotely. We were being used remotely through them while they were themselves being used remotely there. Shock and awe. The human fact-keeping nature is enslaved. There are uses of our identity, suits and ties, counters to it, that are the only ones allowed to speak for our countries. Certain type of victim, if we speak about them as a victim, they're going to self-value roles with everyone all the ways. Offensively, the quality of fact-keeping nature pretended to have integrity, got away with that. When in our faces, we know that the suburbs, anyone who's honest and didn't have, learned properly about the James Madison's Marbury versus Madison, and how our founders had to counter extort the other founders. And if you really understand it, the only reason they were capable of doing that, even though they still didn't have free speech, they were fact-keeping nature enslaved. People were sickly, distinctly enslaved to hide how to keep it, to measure and maintain. Everyone forced without realizing, because all of these things were being forced. And they were blaming on other things, others ourselves. Where and how and why they are using and valuing having used qualities of fact-keeping, aspects of fact-keeping, and as fact-keeping nature that couldn't defend itself and afford the short words used properly for others. Couldn't afford the where and how increasingly too, with instances. Hyper-evidential is recorded. Instances, treatments left out, how there are other names involved with the instances at all locations, areas, and states. Which trials were about, regardless if they were made up or not, and by our founders who didn't have free speech or not, or by the, if it was a real part of that breach. I mean, we know part of it was made up. Part of it completely, to an extent, we know. Their motivations we should not leave out what simultaneously was recorded. Slavery was entrenched. Uses of it forced by a breaching method, but blamed on other things, others ourselves. And that's locked in, because we are increasingly instances. See, people keep saying, "Oh, forget the past, forget the past." There's things people say individually grouped and together because of, in other words, there are things that, life's hard, like life's hard or easy now. relative to a system that uses nature different. Its positive or negative relationship to it. It has five distinct identities of conjunction to itself that are simultaneously three ways bound. So we could discern how one identity is the possession. This is, for example, we have cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall, how manifest, cell wall slash S, with this body, with the hyper invisible but still discernible body of value coming through. Not just the gases coming discernibly coming through, not just the water and the elements coming through, and the benefits of it to us through the plants that we need to eat every day, not just long it. See, nature speaks about identity, about positive and negative. Positive and negative have a simultaneous slash hyper simultaneous relativity to the identity of relativity slash hyper relativity. So that is forced to continually begin as a theorem. I mean, as a theory, because they change what people say if they use short words properly. If we use them properly. The identity of the law of science as a volume science. Identity of an individual as a volume science. It is simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, but also equally value as nature science and as ground, where ground and the identity share an identity. And not, but anyway, because that's where the complete identity. It's one of the ways that the value, the more greater than the only increasing value of discernment of the hyper simultaneous as a distinct identity of hyper simultaneous. Scientifically, that could be discerned, for example, how, where, and how all the different species also have manifest cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall. Where and how descriptions of the atomic nucleus, proton neutron relationships, and electron identity. See, what nature is showing us is its identity of volume, its identity of volume, identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that being equal as the possession of three identities of zero that are only increasing and were only increasing before matter was generated. Nature shows that it is most scientific, most probable, and increasingly demonstrable that matter was generated from an identity of volume, its identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. Since before there was physical matter, there were physical value progressions. This is why we are also simultaneously a nature as value progression and an identity of value progression. So we are mind, brain, and and not just soul. In other words, so we there is an identity of hyper invisible, of hyper simultaneous, that is increasingly valuable in conjunction to with and as part of the answer, as the answers to all what makes the distinct, invisible but discernible volumes of grammar, like articles, like phrases, and like clauses. manifest the way they are. Now, why boxings? See, the scientists, they appear not to share an identity because we left out a special difference too. Because nature is no longer leading the sciences. Because we have and have had inherited self-value roles with all identities of sophistication / non-sophistication, self-valued as uses of 15 identity of the ground conjunctions to our hyperculture, that which is native, hyper-native pure. Everyone is a hyper-native American. I mean, not everyone is a hyper-native American. Everyone is hyper-American, hyper-native American. And if the Native Americans sense that we're not going by the hyper-native system, that's why they're, additionally, that's why their rights are valuable to us, to defend their rights. See, they have rights not through contrast. And we don't have entertained. In other words, we don't leave out the slavery of our founders, let alone the people hurt most by that. And you don't read the law as a tribute, towards blaming with blame, leaving out the other names and things like that. And the breaching method. The breaching method knew that self-valued roles would be like that. So overtly / insidiously in our faces, simultaneously, there has been roles with an identity theft, fraud, slander method, where everyone has these native reactions at each age of your fact-cheating nature, because each age of correlation nature has been maintained effectively, been maintained. Certain type of victim predator / hyper victim predator at the same time. Where and how it counts, where we are fact-cheating nature. Where we are the only individuals that can speak for the individual finite. That goes with the hyperscience. That is really why and how all things are individual group volume while simultaneously volume grouped, and while simultaneously species body of volume /S. I tell it best, boxings. We are 1 / 3 / 5 identities of sequence nature. And the exceptions that appear to be that we are plural, 3 and 5. In other words, we are the order of the finite, the order that is active, or we are individual grouped in species volume. But this is simultaneously finite, active, and progressive. But we're progressive, we know to an extent, has inherent active and progressive till we already see the value to an extent coming. The breaching method knew that New York was the foundation of New York before our founders' parents were even born. It was a part with the breaching method that would measure and maintain roles and uses of all natures of identities, of all natures of unity and of independence and of the exceptions. For the same reason and way, it is significant to how computers work. That method that enabled people to self-value roles with crazy, crazy laws against themselves and against everyone, where no one would be safe. Self-value, in other words, that was a breaching method. you criminally that would use people, all modern countries, it effectively uses them criminally foreign influence while pretending not to be. And while blaming it on other things other than themselves, even when correctly. Like when they have nuclear weapons pointed at each other that long, as the only speed we're on top of the world as the species. But we can fight with each other while we have a foundation that was set up since before our founding parents were born, and everyone was enslaved. And all the records were fake, and that is left out with the judgment that is associated with differentially sick summaries of American history, sick as criminal insidiousness natures, of fact-cheaping nature oriented wise. And these are the ones pretending other by picking out what people say and things like that online, because there's collusions with their methods of criminally foreign influence readings of statutes that involve consciously individually grouped and together, even the branches of government, apart with these 15 identities of the ground. Affronts that are attached to that breaching method of front to our security as the only place that it can be defended, not by accident. The people that run Connecticut's prisons, people that run Connecticut's state judicial branch offices, names all along Route 3. They take pictures. There's some people that take a picture, you make it look like you know them, and with complete strangers. These are intelligence community between public campuses and private campuses. People are in the same class. No, if you're in the same classroom, but no, if you're in the same class, like you're in the same age. So they designed everything. The breaching method knew that it would have to hide lies, and it would have to value means and needs and ways to get. It would have to have everyone else self-value needs, means, and ways to get over on others through instances where it has illusions that it needs blames on other things, others themselves. Where it has subjects treatments, it needs self-defended. When treatments of violence are brought up, when treatments of charity are brought up, when positives and negatives are brought up, criminal insidiousness, natures of positive and negative are in collusion. Criminal insidiousness, natures of identity treatments are standing. Employed were uses of words like politics, with logic that can't defend itself and afford discern. The revelations that come from proper use of the short words. For example, that are using what is true always, not denying the slightest exceptions. Everyone is a hyper human volume science /S. Where it appears to be an exception as plural sciences, but they're in demonstration of the same thing while simultaneously being in demonstration of how it uses exception nature. Where in other words, it is a hyper-additional. Everything is hyper-additional to and as itself, as the identity of volume. That is making more, that is a distinct identity of forever nature. That is being made through the quality of diffusion we are. There are distinct identities of each of words in the dictionary. Most words do are exceptions. In other words, diffusion means like where and how it's making more of itself by coming through the membrane of physical life, the cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall, not just our species. And no, where the ancient languages were revealed to teach, not just to teach this, in observation, being led by what's really going to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures. See, the breaching method employed people. It tactically denatured suburbs, let alone the cities. And it made the cities only capable of being. So it could measure and maintain who was really going to defend the people most like a parent for each modern country's locations. It would measure and maintain them having to do damage control, where what they put the cities as. And now even the suburbs and the cities are reliant upon mass farming. And that's why we can't go free the suburbs till we free the cities. And we can't do that till we do it together, simultaneous nature. That's one of the reasons they keep sickly distinctly. That's why one of the reasons they need a whole bunch of things that are real to blame. Things like violence on, things like injustice that involves the Justice Department, that involves what is bigger than them too, the exception nature tied to them, like the prisons. Sandy Hook, Newtown, Connecticut has fire campuses, has has a prison there. Also involved with the names involved and with investigators of the Sandy Hook shooting, and with subsequent trials, uses of the sense and sensibilities, use Jane Austen's phrase, of the victims of the same things that they've already used words like violence, criminally foreign influence. They spoke about witch trials, criminally foreign influenced, self-value and or self-valuing having been done, and or they attach that person to changed words, fake words, relevant to other things. They bring up, they already had kept upon each location because I had just kept upon each person. And it's a method that knew that I would have the people next to it. This is where we are, the fact, human nature oriented possession of what use our database relationships and relativity slash IES. It's before computers. This exploited where and how and why. All the different computer languages. They have no choice but to deal with exceptions in exception nature. See, but they can't be that which is really the identity that really was, that which really unfolded in the past, because the value of that is only increasing. And there is one way to discern it. This is why Native American rights, which are distinct from, they are hyper Native American too, but they're not, they don't even have Native American rights defended, let alone hyper Native American rights, which again, too, this is where we are. The ground is our identity hyperditionally. We are the ground's identity hyperditionally. And where there are exceptions, we are identity together too. And where we can't be, it's complete identity that way too. We are the only increasing value of where and how it can make more of itself. Even down to how our needs to care about this. Why we have the ability to contemplate and be shown these things. The chorus of black pupils, whites of eyes. Yeah, exception nature. Other has been told regarding aggression. See that violence with psychopath. Yeah, they attach people to fake behavior into databases at each age of your lives. And they've done this. They did this certain type of victim slash hyper victim is involved with the employments of all the identity of the ground locations. This was effectively used to use people remotely to be able to discern collusion with an identity theft slash fraud slash slander method that it knew nature itself would demonstrate to every individual, every group, and the whole volume science. This effectively employed sickly distinctly cultural tortures to effectively maintain self-value. Groupthink, to use a phrase I believe by John Rumsfeld, through or through CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, WFSB, WTNH, and other Connecticut news locations, and people next to their locations. They communicated that they were influenced to say to roles with people who say things, and then they say things at other times, other locations too, where and how overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and all the identities of all these countries shared here and there as criminal enterprise, as criminal insidiousness, nature, self-value, having been left that way, only known. That's simultaneously increasingly self-valuing that. That's simultaneously increasingly self-valued. Natures and narratives regarding things like volume, things like subject treatments regarding like violence or shootings or a type of violence. See, these are being used by our own to measure and maintain. As a breaching method knew that everyone would do. And so it effectively, better than perfectly, carried humanity through phrases that have effectively, self-value roles with identity theft, fraud, slander method, and offensively pretending other against each age of fact, cheaping nature, sickly, distinctly, and with the motivations, narratives. Also, it knew that it would need additional to its own, with its own. So this is also recorded relevant to how, where, and how there are proofs that they left out others' names and involvements. They use truths to lie. They are shown needs to hide their presence together. All these countries as fake identities of ourselves, as forced individual cultural treatments, or they change that person's words, or they change that group's words, and they just make them up, told fake conversations with people. Hartford Hospital and has Institute of Living on it, and this is with the intelligence community, like fire departments and military police forms. All the different rankings and things like that. They have roles on off the state capitol and locations next to it, where that are also roles with where and how effectively to use them remotely, criminally for and influenced. They influence them to make criminally for and influenced time treatments, uses of the locations interbranch. And increasingly, that already went down. And effectively, in other words, worse than witch trials we know were standing at the time when witch trials were there. And see, it is hyper-evidential that and how we didn't have that brought up with that. In fact, we had it is hyper-evidential how other was and is communicated in our faces overtly / insidiously for our founders. Then they asked and needed us to communicate for them. Semi as the Native Americans, and semi as those founders who had to counter extort the other ones, like James Madison. Marbury versus Madison. And the Constitution unabridged is all we need. To defend that, we have to we need to use the phrase criminal insidiousness. We have to understand that phrase. And we have to understand the phrase, the volume science is it actually works identity. It is coming through the cells. It is 5 identities of sequence / simultaneous nature. You have 5 fingers that are 5 identities of sequence / simultaneous nature. Individually grouped and together, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously showing you the identity of relativity / hyper-relativity. There is an extent that we can discern. It has a distinct. We know that there's an extent of the past we know is true always, not denying the slightest exception. It happened. It was real. There is an extent that we know now is real, true always. And there is an extent to come that it hasn't even come, but we know that tonight will be night. Even if we're not here, it will still be night. Relative to the timing and to the weather and to the news, as by nature taught us, as by nature, as it actually presents us evidence / hyper-evidential, means to discern. So please learn. So we know that so in other words, there are people from public schools and private schools, and then people that went to my school I had nothing to do with. And then they're mixed with the people I only know, with exceptions that were, they were recorded. There are means to discern. The only time I knew them was in context they were being used. Some ways by themselves and people around them, some ways by the interbranch. And people, exceptions tied to that, associated with them too. Used for predicate act, roles with predicate acts, criminally foreign influenced, federal evidences crimes, wire crime roles. They're doing that now distinctly from how they had to do that in the past. And what they've been doing, the police forms and the courts have been roles, fabricating audio and video transcripts, fake conversations with people. And they've been doing it with medical communities. See, they have roles with acting professors. They have roles with each of the departments at the campuses, where there has been, since before our founders' births, conscious uses of roles, certain type of victim / hyper victim that have everyone, where they assign the only allowed frustrated reactions or psychopathic reactions. We have psychopaths defending their treatments when they use passions and emotions, when they defend what's calm, or when they should be not calm, as the news even, as the only examples of people that are, speaking with class, allowed to be heard, all communications platforms, additional from the databases, collusions with even worse than that from before that. And while that, to have even all that goes to like private and stuff like that, all kept needing to hide live aggressions to the same locations. There are people all along Route 3. There are people that take pictures. I don't know the people. So, in other words, these are people involved with the spots next to where George Washington came before had to come and counter extort for his roles, forcing everyone to fake narratives while they were coming together. Because because they knew the breaching method had employed and sustained a whole bunch of identities, not just of countries and all the big companies associated with those countries and all that, overt criminal enterprises, all those natures of positive and negative treatments, insidious, criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments too, and negative treatments, time, exclusions, as identity theft, fraud, slander rules, forced by nature, so we could discern its identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that deny. So then reap, but not into so what? The ground is tactically denatured, specifically from metaphorical possessions, for fact, human nature oriented possessions, to effectively maintain self value, identity possessions as a method no one saw coming because it replaced what we're actually capable of discerning through the past. Vaccine is cast. There is one way to fight where even those who lose win. In other words, Native Americans, when they were fighting with Native Americans because the breaching method was upon them before our founding parents were even born, they had to fight about how best to counter what they didn't know how to counter, fact, human nature oriented properly, because they had been separated already. They've been forced to retreat. They've been forced to a nature other than it would have been. They were forced to, not be able to preserve that education. Now they're just to hold on to the memory of the language, or it's even worse because they still don't even have Native American rights liberated. We have clear as day, overtly / insidiously at the same time, the course of Black people's whites advised. How really, all these ways, how really having been left out. This is hyper-evidential. This is proof not, it doesn't matter if you're Native American, Eskimo, or in other words, or if you're the whitest guy in England. See, we have all the technology in the world, better than free. We go like that. You make the bottoms by making the ground's identity of relationship to itself, by checking by the nature's identity of relationship to itself and the value of that, and making sure that it's a nature of relationship to itself where we can keep contemplating. Okay, the fresh water's here. The turtles, they like to have water there. They like it around. Okay, there's the animals. What causes positive value? We have to understand why we hunger, why we thirst. We're supposed to value fresh water. We're supposed to understand what causes positive value nature, progressions, acts, and natures. But see, this breaching method employed the only means to cause positive value nature, progressions, acts, and natures, if they were going to be or entertain criminally foreign influence uses of them. And this needs both at the same time, and exceptions employed as the array and the exceptions. And that plays out because where and how nature works, it is one identity of volume except for how we can only discern that to an extent. And the only way we could discern that is by discerning its conjunction to if it's positive or negative relationship simultaneously, to positive and negative, but where and how it is making more positive, that will only stay positive unto itself. For example, so this slavery against everyone, it is so overt / insidious. It makes it easier. It is positive that it makes it easier to discern and agree about. But rather than have that used, that was obfuscated and self-valued, having been obfuscated by the only people allowed to speak for us, as the law, as the nature of the law, as the identities of the law. And that is including as overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and insidiousness of the logic of people A through Z, because you've had this not taught to you properly. Why and how the people really coordinated and had timed counters and resistance against taxes and with their narratives and other narratives that to fight for independence. But before we were a country, while we were still with the being used criminally for and influenced remotely, and as the sciences, distinctly from how the sciences were, no matter where and how they were manifest, and are manifest. Effectively, this preaching method set what our cities only up again to measure and maintain. Who's going to make them safe? And then counter that by feeding it to even deeper collusion / S that had already been sustained. Now one has trained vaccines. The species body longs to shed a box. Some pace, some rest. I tell it best. Species volume science comes with the other species volume science / S science, being distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. Hyper-additional too, while as Earth too. Group too. So, rather than teach about Marbury versus Madison and our historical locations properly, there have been fake sides where and how the real differences between the sides and like political sides has been used to screen uses of all locations already having been effectively employed to exploit that also at other locations effectively, to keep all that where it could show them means and needs at spots next to parks, at spots next to schools, at spots next to where there are databases like courts and police stations, where and how they could stack fake things in there, where and how they could take part with an identity theft, fraud, slander method, and blame their motivations for it on other things others ourselves. This is really what all kinds of motivations for roles with fentanyl, for example, even if it was made up. For example, the way we could discern, even if the witch trials were made up, they were effectively used by a breaching method to measure and maintain through our own, even their own additional motivations for it from its own, but with and as its own, because it times keeps them needing to hide the same uses of the pretended integrity of all identity ground locations, for example. We know that people pretended and still pretend that there's a difference of opinions when people say slavery is wrong. See, but we haven't prevented the use of the hyper-evidential. See, people use truths for lies. It is a truth that one of the ways you could judge if someone's logic is correct or not is by if they cite sources or not. I mean, it's also truth. That's one of the ways you can tell if it's original. See, but everyone left out when they went with their life doing for other reasons too. The hyper evidential. And how people could be motivated and already recorded themselves. They're also on off the shopping centers. The interbranch and the exception nature tied to them. All these other identities of overt criminal enterprises. They have recorded how effectively timed that locations kept needing to hide. Really. Criminally foreign influence uses of their motivations, of their sense and sensibilities, time to locations. This effectively, there are means to discern conscious uses of other consciously communicated for our founders, then they communicated for us to communicate with them. They communicate for us not to leave out the breaching method and the forced, measured and maintained roles with while as fact nature oriented slaves, or they'd be sensed and heard, including our founders. They had to force everyone to pretend other narratives and motivations were behind their unity and their fights regarding that. So remember, in other words, the Native Americans knew that they had to fight with each other verbally. They had to figure out as a fact-treatment nature how to counter properly and their best that which was being and had already been sustained upon them, upon their parents before them, before our founders were even born, before our founders' parents were even born, that had been sustained. So the word fight doesn't mean negative automatically. It takes contemplation. And the hyper-invisible is there. And we know the human volume science, that's hyper-native, we all are. They weren't even being allowed to be Native American. They already tactically denatured the ground. It is more probable that they had replaced that which they had remembered originally. And they have measured and maintained by the breaching method, then forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, to blame that on other things other than yourself, or when correctly, to use that to obfuscate the increasing, better than perfect, tactical desecration of Native American, which is also hyper Native American. Their hyper Native American rights are prevented as everyone from whatever country you're from, you have hyper rights that have been prevented. The generation of humanity, every individual's body, no matter how powerful the person could get, they could only be over locations, areas, and states that are forcing, entertained, self-valued, criminally foreign influence uses of qualities of aspects of in nature of fact-treatment nature, quality fact-treatment aspects. In other words, as criminal insidious natures of them, of qualities of fact-treatment nature, aspects of fact-treatment nature, and natures of it. So we could discern nature's nature. when we discern nature being lied about, we could discern criminal insidiousness is nature, but it is not nature that is positive to itself. Before there are people behind violence and all the shootings and things like that, and the differences between the shootings. They make the difference between if it's a quiet neighborhood. This isn't, oh, this is a quiet neighborhood. There are individuals with more predicate acts roles as a certain type of victim / hyper victim, but which is relative to where they make excuses. Time, the interbranch of work, criminal enterprises, private ones, insidiousness of people A through Z are self-valued roles with fake things stacked into databases against everyone. Fake conversations, fake ties to other people, fake natures of ties to other people. The intelligence community discrediting good information and crediting good information, where and how effectively, increasingly, better than perfectly, is remote possession of self-value time treatments at all legal locations, formal, private, formal, interbranch, even grouped further, specifically for uses of the methods and means and needs to get away with that at other locations by using little tricks where they make kids and adults collude to take pictures of kids that don't even know each other, where they have roles with other countries and total strangers from the same age groups and things like that, pretending passions and emotions, using all exception nature and demonstration of the same thing, but as roles where and how relative to every person is where and how the quality of fact human nature has gotten away with, having been denied. The most sacred things where our countries have people that will sacrifice their whole lives, even shortened to even if they sacrifice their life literally to people involved with the furtherance of this logic and the uses of it relative. So they have been preventing free speech at our locations we are at. And they have been getting away with it because of all kinds of medical corruption associated, for example. But it is simultaneously where differential criminal foreign influences are recorded involved. So they've been using the locations with the databases like private, like medical, like databases and personally tied to the interbranch family members so long, and they have forced patients to criminals. They also have roles with forced mental evaluations. And so they start fights and things, and where they can solve them if the people want to do it fact nature oriented. But that quality of fact nature is being forced. Then people yell or they make mistakes and do things, less, but they get charged. They charge people wrong. They're leaving out their names and other people's names with the involvements and uses of that recorded as we've actually means to discern this. Investigations and investigators have been used criminally for and influenced roles, needs, and natures with all locations uses. So the breaching method used locations and memory, use identity the same way that computers do. And you could explain this very shortly. These are short words. So when I start using these short words, things will start changing the short words in science, but anyone does, to adapt to what they already did in defense of their takes of the law and of logic and of their narratives by their passions and emotions treatments. They recorded effective uses of people leaving out how the passions and emotions are about the simultaneous slash hyper simultaneous, or you're being dishonest about that, you know, or simultaneously everyone's making things that are complicated and where they're simple simultaneously opposite because of the extent of uses of roles effectively, for example, motivations narratives and motivations narratives and natures are effectively used to measure and maintain effectively self-valued criminally foreign influence uses of all formal locations as collusions with all informal, like areas where there are shootings and more areas around as the spots where shootings happen and murders happen in the suburbs. The same people have roles with this. Institute of Living at Hartford Hospital has been attaching little kids and their family members to fake conversations and ties to themselves and their family members with judges and prosecutors from Hartford courts and the British courts with the FBI, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. A whole bunch of people tied to him, like a Thaddeus Grabowski, a Domain family, um, a Mendez police forms family, on and off Fox Connecticut News, on and off the Wethersfield Police Department, involved with wire crimes, federal crimes on and off child campuses, even with child sex offenders, even with female judges involved, and with prosecutors and their family members. This is where where investigators have been used remotely, criminally foreign influence. Roles with uses of connected body dumping spots. How they bring up all these things in names too. One of the things effectively used to keep the branches criminally foreign influence is where they use instances where the volume slash S of the different identities with the positions at the courts in their formal capacities, because they have their private capacities also involved. Then they pretend it's personal. They're preventing us from speaking about how they are victim predators. We know they have good excuses, but they're switching names, forging names. They have a whole predicate acts, methods, roles, that and as styles and natures that can't defend that and afford discern the communications and the nature. Because when that our founders really need us to communicate for them and to be for them that nature that they weren't not allowed to be. That is allowing people to use prayer, for example, as an identity of contemplation, as an identity of means to ground answer slash S. Our countries admitted that they are psychopaths regarding nuclear weapons and the needs for war. Our countries that committed they are psychopaths relative to where and to how. They have denied the short words and where and to how. Unity. You know, they have people, they have interbranch criminally foreign influence readings of statutes regarding what people could say, how you respond to what people say online. They left out the exceptions, how the interbranch locations have been using that to plant fake things in narratives. Now with people too, a whole bunch of people off Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University involved with intelligence community that is involved with predicate acts on my street here that also have roles with the names of predicate acts at other places I lived. Time. So there are means to discern the intelligence communities and how they are measured and maintained effectively, criminally foreign influence and pretending other. Timed with the overt criminal enterprises and private ones through time, consciously between campuses of each age and nature, each grade even. They have sickly distinctly involved with the method where they used the volumes distinct as criminal insidious in its natures, including the branches of government, remotely out of their locations. And all that to keep them used remotely because they understand it to an extent. Where and how they are shown needs and means to hide that actively while simultaneously preemptively in other ways. I mean, and from the past. In other words, not one has spoken for the Constitution on a bridge. Certain type of victim / hyper victim that cannot simultaneously speak for hyper Native American rights, let alone Native American rights until then. We are to discern. No, if you discern any group's rights, group of the human species, volume science, entertained apart from. Another way they get away with this, they have black families from Weathersfield involved with the state judicial branch offices, involved with the Spada family that a Cololo family brought up. I've tried to leave out names, but they brought these names up. Officer Jerry Miller brought up a Kerr family. Brought up a Jerry Kerr, and Officer Jerry Miller. There's two Jerry Kerrs, and there's a lease. There's one from Maine, too. There are people with Maine. There are people associated with various criminal enterprises that I never had criminal. There are kids that I never had classes with. They try to make fake exceptions of knowing me where they locked the interbranch roles with fact-cheating nature-oriented predicate acts and uses of them. Things like wire crimes, falsified police reports, child abuse in that capacity, using consciously falsified police reports to abuse all the kids, including their own, but the others sickly distinctly. Not just to benefit their own kids, they also need that pretended motivation because others associated with remote uses of them. So there's a Leahy family that had pretended conversations with me with tied to this. There is a Violet family involved with this, with people with UConn campuses. There is a Mayano families involved with this. A whole bunch of people say that modern pastry and Mazzucato pastry, and it's also recorded that way. They're involved with the intelligence community, involved on off campuses, also with the Connecticut news media locations next to the campuses, involved planting federal evidences, crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders. There are also people I don't know. I was only nice to him in passing, like we barely communicated 1 year with a football team. I played for a short time when I was a freshman. In other words, there's narratives and backgrounds about people with where they have overt criminal enterprises and judges and prosecutors and people, military also foreign and domestic, how they're criminally foreign influence. There are Klavinskis families. I only saw Justin Klavinskis on campus one time, on one campus in my life, real fast. And it was a confirmation. As one of the confirmations of others too. I mean, the only confirmation for him and demonstration, he was associated with a Lucinda and others associated with him and his family member with houses near me, with the intelligence community, foreign and domestic, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, sequence shifts, while falsified police reports, all along Wells Road, from Weathersfield to CCSU, rolls with federal evidences crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders in that capacity for federal evidence crimes. But this is also where and how that is used. In other words, these are people involved with uses of the World Trade Center remotely, criminally foreign influence, and the places next to it, like the Ninth Circuit Court, and next to that, consciously. This is a method that uses each location and each location next to each location, consciously where and how it is a fact-cheating nature oriented. Predicate acts delivery system method. There are even proofs that is a hyper predicate acts / hyper predicate acts delivery system method. which is best way to describe it. I'm not a lawyer. We also, the hyper-evidentials, how the lawyers blame the other things others ourselves, the real causes of things like slavery, as collusion slash S. For example, with the obfuscations of what is actually not just hyper-evidential, but what is even easier, and it's easier to discern what is hyper-evidential, but they make it hard to use. In other words, of course, you have black people's whites of eyes. We know this. We know readings of statutes have stayed criminally foreign influenced. We know that New York City, for example, is sickly distinctly tactically denatured and employed by a breaching method that also employed other motivations, natures, needs, interests to appear to be its own without them even realizing. But to an extent, and when even those extents individually grouped and together, they didn't fathom until too late. And where and how, it, even if people are successful or not, all that hurts them is tied to this. In other words, no matter how powerful a leader got, no one was allowed to entertain anything but criminal insidiousness, positive treatments, and negative treatments simultaneously that are effectively used to keep the identity that is all things at once, hyper simultaneously, from being used. The identity of hyper relativity. There is an identity of hyper relativity that is conjunctive to all parts of English grammar, all conjunctions. How could you properly describe and understand them without understanding the hyperconjunction? You can't. In other words, well, how can you understand how and discern the sciences share an identity without simultaneously? When you start revealing that, you're simultaneously revealing shown criminally foreign influenced uses, delusions, wrought uses of the sciences having been abridged, where they're being abridged, and where they're being exploited, where they are abridged. They're also getting away with it because they're also self-valuing this having been. This is where there are employments of victim slash hyper victim roles only known. No matter how powerful you could be, you know, a leader of the most powerful countries. There was, in other words, locations, areas, and states are still entertaining what cannot entertain itself. So, we know one thing is true always: nature wants us to eat and long to eat foods and things that are good for ourselves, and not just because they're good for ourselves, not just because we need them, because it's teaching us about positive value nature progression, negative value nature progression, and the difference between how something can be natural as criminal insidiousness and still be natural, but not. We can make things up. We can make up other systems and force everyone to rolls with it, just like the breaching methods forces that only capable of being fathomed. Otherwise, they're going to be sabotaged. Any individual approaching any nature of industry, let alone, even from your house. So, in other words, we have to have mandated law follow locations, and we can't have that until we get unhinged all the roles that all investigators and investigations of that already had and have. The fentanyl is effectively used to maintain, even if it was made up, is effectively used to maintain roles stacking fake things in databases, and then later at time where, because all the people involved with those conversations. So Matt Pierce, I never had any conversation with him. I was only I was around him a couple of times. You know what I mean? Even that, in other words. And I never had a conversation with his mother. I don't know if that was his mother. There's a woman in the Pierce family, and there's also a Jody Pierce. There are people associated with a Paul Abted that worked for Hartford Hospital that have been since I was a kid. Roles with falsified police reports, federal evidence crimes, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, foreign and domestic medical families, roles with people, insidiousness of people A through Z. There's a Fred Grisey who's also involved with so there are people with like a whole bunch of people on Trinity College that confessed and demonstrated that there's a Joshua Stryker and others associated with conversations with the intelligence community with my area. People involved with shipping locations, involved with identity thefts and frauds with them through time, wire crime roles with them. Interbranch switching names have roles with this. So they have been preventing me writing, and so they could not respond. They're delaying what I caught them doing intercities. They brought up a whole bunch of different subjects because they know they prevent the quality of fact-keeping nature unless you entertain subject treatments that are criminally foreign influence, just like the news has it. You have to have forced collusions, even if you're not a news person, with their fakeness. It has something to do with their roles with all these different countries. They have people with Germany. They have people with with Asian countries. They have with Italy. They have all the Ireland, all the countries involved on off Central Connecticut State University, on off Trinity College, with names on off my street involved with predicate acts of Wethersfield Police, State Police, FBI. Then they pretend it's personally, like criminally too. So we have to deal with the fakeness that's pretending other. Fake news is worse than that, to use President Trump's phrase. Predicate acts delivery system method. There are news predicate acts. Please fix their narratives by their motivations for it. And I'm not a licensed journalist. So we have the needs for hyper-journalism also recorded increasingly value existing. Yeah. It means appear, vaccines. I teach us things belong. Vaccine. Okay, thank you. Someone get me a response. Get them a response. Get them a name. Someone please. Because I have not. They made fake letters and they put fake audio and video transcripts. The FBI and the state police forms. People associated with forensics locations. Avoiding forensics has roles with child offenders on the registry and their worst patients and criminals before they got caught. Fear God. These are people on off the state prison offices, state judicial branches. I make no theory here. Get them on paper now. Don't watch out because they use the phrases like criminal, conspiracy theory as people involved with the World Trade Center on our side, with all those other nations involved with the attack and with uses of the responses and the investigation investigated that. So there's a big difference between wearing a camouflage, even if you're a general and all those badges, and being not criminally foreign influence. There's a big difference. Fix the fake news and respond for Hartford Hospital too, with the interbranch, Hartford Courts, New Britain Courts, Middletown Courts, all those names. You guys brought it up. You know what they do? They have people too. When they force a mental evaluation, if you don't want to communicate, they have someone make a statement, walk away. And that's after they put people, in other words, you're going to watch the sick mental health care uses of that phrase too. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions rob, as which actually recorded people, America, here, culture. They have this fake culture with suits and ties, counters to it. Humanity everywhere. We know that the uses of our names is wrong, so we know them. We have to counter the breaching method. Knew we'd have to counter things like criminal foreign influences, by wrongly, and they knew that effectively. They were correctly knew that people would do it by blaming other names, others, ourselves incorrectly, and that's sustained would make more and more needs and means, where there are correct means and needs, to use our names and call each other names, to fight with each other. But this is where and how it was positive for the Native Americans to fight with each other, fact, human nature oriented, to fight with each other, passionately to get to what they thought would do best for everyone at once. Now, after they had been, and while they were being impositioned upon by that sustained tactical replacement of their short words, proper, of the ground's identity of relationship to itself, of the ground itself, of the ground's identity of relationship to itself, and of the only increasing value of that, and of why, and of how. And as the answer, vaccines. I teach us things belong. This is my programming in the word. Before I could do business, I have to have the response for this. We're going to deal with the hyper-evidential. The interbranch gave up their ability to be trustworthy. They are recorded consciously pretending. See, they are self-valuing when there are riots. They are self-valuing how and why. That is relative to where and how they've been using the schools with interest from off them, and then hiding that. And it is recorded conscious uses of it years later. And this is where and how they're getting away with pretending people are liars at interbranch locations, as the ones putting fake things in databases, as roles with crime scenes, as roles with private exceptions tied to them, not as the interbranch, but as them too, all in collusions with exceptions too, because differential criminal foreign influence is also something effectively used by the group breaching method that knew everyone would not want roles with the breaching method, but they would increasingly have to self-value roles with it. So they were increasingly differentially, but increasingly better than perfectly be used remotely. And how and where they use it remotely, you could discern because it is recorded. There are means to discern how it is recorded, how Connecticut courts switch names, forge names, and speak things into records and pretend passions and emotions into records, pretend to be doing their jobs legitimately when they know they are not. For example, regarding black and white, and where they and or regarding the exception nature. Nature gave everyone means to discern this. So, in other words, when they speak, and they already spoke for things like jobs, for identity, the law, the nature of the law, the identity of the law, they can't defend that. And the value of what that's really about to be discerned. Not one has learned vaccines. You learn, but correctly the correct, even when correct things. No. So please, WFSB, please fix that fake news, predicate acts. And if you want to go into where I did say things online that were aggressive and things like that, for example, that was after sequence shifts and relative involvements of courts and police forms at crime scenes, known and unknown yet. Because of the involvements of it. So a whole bunch. They said their roles with Elm Street and with the Mayano family and with the intelligence community has roles with the Oliveri family and an Aiello family. I mean, not Aiello. Them too, but with Elm Streets in Weathersfield and Rocky Hill. We're with people involved with federal evidences crimes, with judges and prosecutors, and Weathersfield police families, state police families, foreign and domestic military and police families, overt criminal enterprises and private ones involved with federal crimes together, timed with the databases, with wire and mail crimes when I was a kid. The whole methods of them tied to the falsified police reports They put charges and then put fake things in data with no writing, and then they use that to put fake things in databases, etc. Fake conversations between police and little kids, fake conversations between police and their family members through time now. In other words, I never had a conversation with the police at the kids. When they attached other kids to fake conversations, they had them bring those things up too. So a spotted family and Walter's family sought me out to confess and demonstrate that they have roles with Knott Street in the Walker Hill corner, with the intelligence community, and with narratives with names that know mine, but I don't know theirs. There's a Finelli family, a Fienza family, and a Fazina family, and there is a Stocco family involved with people on and off the state, on and off Central Connecticut State University, also with the Board of Educations, with the FBI and the police forms, and their overt criminal enterprise, various natures of federal criminals, like ones associated with and as co-defendants of former director of the FBI Robert Luskin in a 2006 case. Right before that, he's recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, also with people next to Fox Connecticut News, like involved with Alison Mulcahy, and I don't know her sister's name. I never met Alison Mulcahy. She's recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with the Domain family and Mendez family intelligence community at spots next to Fox Connecticut News in downtown Hartford, which is and the spots next other spots next to the state capitol and next to those locations, with various natures of identity theft. People's associated with her recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed her involved. We're also where we're forced to speak through others. These are also with women interbranch involved with child offenders, where they've been getting away with. These are people with the FBI involved leading up to a 2006 case. In that case, it says leading up to a Ninth Circuit District Court case slash S right before the World Trade Center attack, which is right next to the towers, right before the attack, and spots next to it. The same ones involved with that were ones involved leading up when I was a kid, with the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and people that work with the state, with World Trade Center. Also, the nudes attached me and my family to fake conversations about the World Trade Center and about legal cases with themselves and with other. And they lied about the outcome of legal cases with as themselves and of others, as people involved also with the proven after the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Center, right before the attack and or leading up to the attack. Shortly before it, from inside the Ninth Circuit Court, legal papers that had been brought to the court on time and time stamped on time. Someone insidiously and people grouped to it at the same time had insidiously post dated those legal papers to appear from inside the court to appear as if they were late, filed late to the panel of judges. That was proven after the World Trade Center attack, but had been right before the attack in New York City. And then so that and that after that was proven, that led up to the 2006 district court case in New Haven, Connecticut, which is involved with the names on and off campuses, intercities, and on and off Fox Connecticut News and the locations next to it. Also has names all along Hangdog Lane, where it runs into Two Route Highway, and Two Route Highway, in other words, in the conjunctions to it, like Route 3, which goes by the state judicial branch offices. In other words, a whole bunch of people out of the state judicial branch offices involved with Mike Roberts also with these names, with the judges and their family members, like with the Spada family and their boyfriends and the people on my street and with involved with the name Cololo. And they have extended family members also with the name Scalora, with police that confessed and confirmed, demonstrated them involved with roles with the abuses of kids, also sexual and medical at the same time, also judicial at the same time. You can't leave out the women judges and prosecutors and roles at the people at the court. But they use the hallways of the court. People walk by, pretend they know you, pretend they're trying to embarrass you, make you feel ashamed, or whatever. In other words, they're making things up into databases. So please get them on paper with the models and all that too. The Hartford courts and the Britain courts, I caught them at West Hartford locations before the World Trade Center. They were confessed and recorded. Then people asked me for help about that. These are Connecticut courts and names involved with the ones in those locations. And then they try. Then they get involved with instances. They recorded themselves involved with motivations and uses of police departments' arrests and instances to bring court things and evidences before courts criminally, so they could use those things to hide life progressions and to maintain their own criminal foreign influence uses, simultaneously juxtapose other people's criminally foreign influence uses of those locations, like courts, like all tied to them, all exception nature, increasingly every location, even your homes, everyone, even yourself, that you were attached to fake words and databases, fake ties to other people, fake natures and ties to other people. Look at the black and white. They have effectively kept that assigned. Where this is also a hyper-evidential, that and how they have effectively kept that assigned to measure and maintain, effectively left out where and how the human volume science is there, individual grouped in together. Note how women speak. They have a means to speak better than we men do, like a nicer way. Like there's a positive that they have additionally to us that we can't be, that we can't mimic. Look how men could use voice and speak in ways with aggression better than women simultaneously. And the hyper simultaneous comes with it too. There is a needs to understand criminal foreign influences, but there are more important needs to understand how that they are blamed on other things, others ourselves, and that is an effectively maintained outcome and uses of it. So roles with the predicate acts methods are recorded across the board. So all we have to do is admit that. Forgiveness is for this. You all stay rules. Forgive your souls. Boxing. Follow mandated law when I tell you right now. Don't change what I say. They've been fabricating audio and video on and off Trinity College, on and off CCSU, as the names involved on and off the principal child abusers campus. I caught first. First! I caught it first. I caught it first. And they attached me to fake aggressive words. And they attached me to fake calmness or natures of it or why I was it. They're pretending they have credibility and that we need trust in them. And they're using, so that's why one of the reasons they self-value while pretending the chaos with groups like with the attack on January 6th at the state capitol, effectively used to measure and maintain roles, collusions with James Comey, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson of Racketeering Influence Corrupt Organization Act, as one of the ones on and off Weathersfield campuses, Rocky Hill campuses, New Britain campuses, West Hartford campuses involved with child abuses, even sexual, medical, overt criminal enterprises, drugs, medicines, crimes, predators. At the same time, their family members, increasingly at other locations like corners, kept needing to hide life progression, locations saying things after they already said other because of where and how effectively used remotely are criminally foreign influenced uses of investigators, their campuses. And differentially, when that's not the case, it's also increasingly they're self-valuing simultaneously. It's true anyway because their roles with the prisons with their worst patients and criminals before they got caught. The courts are recorded consciously pretending that they have integrity where they know they don't, and they're pretending that we have motivations for bringing such up that other than we don't. They have a whole bunch of countries using things like phrases like conspiracy theories, using pretending they have medical integrity with mental health, where they have criminally foreign influenced tactically delusions wrought mental health experts involved with their patients and criminals, sickly, and how they've been getting away with it. Roles with uses of judges and prosecutors, like associated with the shopping centers, like on and off Town Line Drive. Whole bunch of people with foreign and domestic intelligence community involved with this Mike Pandoff. And with the Della Fera families, I never even saw them on that shopping center. And with the Kerr families, and with the DeMorrow families, were recorded. I never saw John DeMorrow there. He wanted me to go there when I was in middle school as a stranger who sought me out to confess and demonstrate his roles with a Mr. Abruzzi, my fifth grade teacher, with his brother and his other foreign and domestic family members, with the areas of overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and people associated with the Robert Rodriguez. Robert Rodriguez is also involved with the principal child abusers campus and houses and families next to them, the campuses that I don't know that have been pretending other into the databases with people associated with them, also with violence on my street and credible threats of it as their ties to it and their motivations, because it makes it look like you, if I say that or if they say that, it makes it look like I know them, had communications with them. They painted themselves in corners. They have their roles with the Weathersfield town offices where the Weathersfield Police Department used to be, and their roles with names were not at spots next to where it is now, as the ones who, through time, have been involved on off the town offices, on off the campuses, roles with predicate acts, as if you look at what is actually recorded. They've been hiding behind their roles with a whole bunch of different countries. They recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, is involved with them uses of the rights to lie, where they don't have the right to lie, as roles with predicate acts, delivery system, method, news. I'm not a licensed journalist. They were recorded roles, how they used the family members and the friends and the teachers and the campuses of the journalists as and their quality of investigators. You know, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Sick. They've been faking things. And with as journalists, and they've been using that fake stuff as roles with predicate acts methods in private cases, in legal cases, also where and how there are means to discern predicate acts methods used to hide what they were used for already. The branches of the government even too, individually grouped and together. They have methods indistinctly grouped, like switching names. They switch names and self-value roles with that group distinctly grouped from what they do individually. Weathersfield Police have a whole bunch of people that use the name McGee. And they have one guy who came in after the first guy who used it in the first of the multiple falsified police reports. These are also roles further with sexual and medical predators of the kids, including how they have women roles with it. And then they have the involved socially and professionally with the sociologists, things like that, the exception nature. They have the whole arrays making opinions. Everyone's using what other people are saying, and no one's putting anything on paper, because they were also, the delay is effectively using and having used the roles of the campuses to stack fake things in databases. And with the fake difference between, the ages difference and the interbranch, and their kids are in collusion with the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and all the rest. But I tell it best. So why are they confessing this if they don't get on paper? They want to they can't. In other words, they're confessing it because they're not putting anything on paper. So get them on paper, Connecticut, so I don't have to keep using other people's names. They're pretending I'm bringing up their names. They brought their names up. So and they brought more leaders of the kids involved with child abuses through time connected. So rather than keep it like pretending I'm talking personally about them, get me a response so I don't have to use more names, because I don't even met these people. Then they give them an excuse. Oh, well, he was saying something about me, and they change what I'll say. They know that they hid this. With that, as well, they hid. There was more involved then and now with the principal child abuser. A whole bunch of people with whiting forensics have roles with their patients and criminals, through time connected. They have roles with a whole bunch of names at Trinity College and Hartford, Connecticut. That have recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with a Clola family and with a Joshua Stryker, who I never saw in my area. But a whole bunch of people tied to the Clola family recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed They got involved with some way with them, and some ways the Clove family used them to hide the interbranch roles, some with over criminal enterprises, private ones, not legitimately police undercover, not legitimately military undercover, not legitimately roles with the other countries shared at the locations like at Elm Streets in Rock Hill and Weathersfield. Get them onto paper because these are people involved with conversations with my teacher behind my back as sick, fake punks, tools, criminally foreign influence. And then make it pretend it's personal against us. That's also what they're recorded consciously doing. People from off the locations. They're forcing us to use the name. Weathersfield police called me up with the name and confessed this over the phone and from the Weathersfield town offices. Then they pretended it was the police department, but I confirmed it. But they're switching names with more names now. They have the Weathersfield women police use sickly distinctly from the males, sickly distinctly with child offenders as child abusers roles. Now we have the male judges and female judges use sickly distinctly too, and how on off the state judicial branches offices. We have hyper-evidential to use. There are the fines of families, also one of the ones. Now, a whole bunch of people will recorded, confess, demonstrated, confirmed that people I don't know, as people mixed with the people I only know in context, they were used for federal evidences crimes, seeking me out to pretend they knew me, like the Dumaros, brought up the Keene family, others, people associated with the mayors, with a Christopher Cullen, with Cullen's family, people involved with Joe Aiello, with the spots next to Trinity College, involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, even if legitimately as undercover police forms. They're illegitimately involved with child sex offenders, people on the child sex offender registry involved with identity thefts and frauds with them, acting so someone can take a picture and pretend they know us. I only saw Joe Aiello on campus one time when I was in high school after he graduated. They need because they were hanging around for years. They were pretending they knew me as roles with federal evidences crimes through Time Connected, a whole bunch of connected falsified police reports. They've been used. This is relative to where and to how they were recorded conscious uses of words like crimes to measure and maintain that they have the newscasters criminally foreign influence, distinctly from the operators of their, of their fake difference as Democrats and Republicans. Our founders left us to demonstrate that, and the uses of the exception natures too, collusions which cannot afford discern how nature uses. Nature is anything that can be made or made up or revealed for that is actually is, but it is also two identities uh, of sequence / simultaneous nature, hyper simultaneously with this. So we'll examine this box, the first vaccines. Thank you. I teach you things belong.